This is the real secret between US government and Venezuela government. There are wars you can see, and then there are wars you feel. No bombs falling, no soldiers marching, yet an entire nation begins to suffocate. This is the story of Venezuela, and how its confrontation with the United States became one of the most intense geopolitical standoffs of the 21st century. Not through invasion, but through pressure, sanctions, and power. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, even larger than Saudi Arabia. For decades, oil was Venezuela's lifeline. It funded schools, hospitals, subsidies, and social programs. And for years, the United States was one of Venezuela's biggest oil customers. But oil is never just oil. It is leverage. And when politics changed, oil became a weapon. The relationship between the US and Venezuela began to collapse long before Donald Trump. Under President Hugo Chavez, Venezuela adopted a strong anti-US stance, accusing Washington of imperialism and interference. After Chavez's death, Nicolas Maduro took power. The US and several Western countries later declared that Maduro's elections lacked legitimacy, citing election irregularities, suppression of opposition, control over institutions. Maduro rejected these claims entirely. To him, this was not democracy enforcement. It was foreign domination. The lines were drawn. Then came the sanctions. Under the Trump administration, the US imposed some of the harshest sanctions in modern history on Venezuela. These sanctions targeted Venezuela's oil industry, blocked access to international banks, froze billions of dollars in overseas assets. The US said the goal was simple: pressure the government to restore democracy. But inside Venezuela, the impact was devastating. Oil production collapsed. Inflation skyrocketed. The currency lost value almost overnight. Families stood in long lines for food. Hospitals lacked medicine. Millions fled the country. By 2020, over 7 million Venezuelans had left their homeland. This was not a battlefield, but it felt like one. In 2020, the US took an unprecedented step. The US Department of Justice indicted Nicolas Maduro and senior officials on drug trafficking and corruption charges. A $15 million reward was announced for information leading to Maduro's arrest. To Washington, this was law enforcement. To Caracas, it was a declaration of war. Maduro accused the US of attempting regime change and assassination plots. Trust was gone. Dialogue collapsed. As pressure increased, Venezuela turned elsewhere. To Russia for military cooperation. To China for loans and infrastructure. To Iran for fuel and strategic support. This transformed the conflict. It was no longer just US versus Venezuela. It became part of a global power struggle. A chessboard stretching far beyond Latin America. Behind every sanction, behind every political speech, were real people. Parents unable to feed their children. Doctors performing surgeries without supplies. Families walking across borders with nothing but bags. The Venezuelan crisis became one of the largest migration crises in the world. Each side blamed the other. The truth? Ordinary citizens paid the highest price. Despite rumors, headlines, and online speculation, there was no US military capture of Venezuela's president. No invasion. No dramatic arrest. Only economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, endless tension. A conflict frozen in place. This is not a story with a clean ending. The U.S. Venezuela conflict continues, quietly, relentlessly. A war fought with money instead of missiles, with oil instead of armies. And the question still lingers. Can a nation be forced into change without destroying its people? By 2021, something changed. The world was hit by a global pandemic, supply chain breakdowns, rising energy prices. Suddenly, Venezuelan oil mattered again. Quietly, back-channel talks began between US officials and Venezuelan representatives. No cameras, no press conferences, just survival-driven diplomacy. The same sanctions meant to isolate Venezuela were now complicating global energy stability. In a move few expected, the US began issuing limited licenses to allow certain oil activities in Venezuela. Not because the conflict was resolved, but because reality intervened. Oil markets were tight, prices were rising, and geopolitics demanded flexibility. This wasn't forgiveness, it was a pause. A reminder that ideology often bends to necessity. Despite years of pressure, Nicolas Maduro stayed in power. No collapse, no overthrow. For critics of sanctions, this became evidence. Pressure hurt civilians more than leadership. For supporters, the argument remained. Without pressure, there would be no leverage at all. Both sides claimed truth. Both sides pointed fingers. But Maduro was still standing. Inside Venezuela, opposition movements struggled. Some leaders fled. Others were jailed. Many lost public trust. Years of instability exhausted the population. Hope became fragile. People stopped asking who should rule, and started asking how to survive. By now, nearly 1 in 4 Venezuelans lived outside the country. Entire neighborhoods emptied. Children grew up speaking of Venezuela as a place they no longer remembered, only heard about. This was not just a political crisis. It was a national trauma. For the United States, the question became uncomfortable. How long can pressure continue? Before it becomes permanent suffering? Sanctions were never meant to last forever. Yet lifting them without political change risked appearing weak. This was the trap. Every option carried consequences. Today, Venezuela relations exist in a gray zone. Not enemies at war. Not partners at peace. Just two powers locked in a stalemate shaped by oil, influence, survival, and time. No dramatic arrests. No final showdown. Only endurance. History will debate who was right. But history will not forget the cost. Because in every silent war, it is never the powerful who suffer most. It is the people caught in between.